Is it finally time for Canada to stand up to China's communist regime? In December 2018, two Canadians, known to most as the two Michaels, were arbitrarily detained and imprisoned in a Chinese jail, arrested on what everyone agrees were trumped-up charges in apparent retaliation to this country's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Except these situations aren't even remotely the same. Canada arrested Meng only after receiving a legitimate arrest warrant from the United States, a country with which we have a long-standing and internationally recognized extradition treaty. We even allow her, while out on bail, to live in a luxury apartment, wear fancy clothes, and waltz around on high-end shopping trips to Vancouver's malls. China, on the other hand, literally kidnapped two Canadian citizens, holding them hostage in a red Chinese prison while demanding the metaphorical ransom of Meng's release be paid in full, demanding, in effect, some sort of bizarre prisoner exchange, insisting we break our own laws, undercut our own institutions, and bow down to a country apparently of which we should all be afraid. Which is why it's so important that we don't do exactly that. For if we allow ourselves to be bullied, if we allow ourselves to be pushed around, not only will we be sacrificing our own sovereignty and independence, we'll be incentivizing the very belligerents we claim to be fighting against, not to mention betraying one of our closest allies, the United States, a country that gladly purchases 75% of Canada's exports, while China, in contrast, accounts for only 4%. And yet some are calling on Canada to do exactly that, with a number of politicians, including former cabinet ministers and even a former leader of the NDP, calling for the legal process to be scrapped and for Meng to be immediately released. Now, in fairness to Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, this has been one issue where, surprisingly, he hasn't capitulated entirely, where he hasn't just thrown in the towel. But he hasn't exactly stood up to China either. He's allowed the kidnapping and solitary confinement of two Canadian citizens to go virtually unpunished. And he continues to pass the buck on deciding who should build Canada's 5G networks, refusing to rule out Huawei, the preferred supplier of China's communist regime. In fact, the looming threat has convinced Canada's allies that our 5G networks, if built by Huawei, could become a one-way espionage superhighway with direct access to Beijing. This is a company that has literally been called an extension of the Chinese surveillance state, which is why all other members of the so-called Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Alliance, the US, Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, have already barred Huawei equipment from their own 5G networks. Trudeau, on the other hand, apparently thinks it's best we kick the can down the road, ignoring the serious risk Huawei presents to the privacy of Canadians and the very real possibility our inaction could get us kicked out of the Five Eyes Alliance altogether. Look, we cannot allow a foreign country to arbitrarily arrest and detain two Canadian citizens indefinitely without consequence. Something needs to be done. And that must begin with clearly articulating what this country stands for and refusing to back down from bullies who think they can push us around. After all, this is not a small, insignificant country. This is Canada, one of the world's largest economies, a resource superpower, and a founding member of the most powerful military alliance in the history of the world. For nearly 50 years, Canada's corporate and political establishment have worked to deepen ties with China's communist regime, and they don't want the Meng affair to undermine their agenda. They want Canada to give in, to simply go back to the way things were before. But Canadians are starting to wake up. It's time to rethink Canada's policy of bowing down to China's communist regime. It's time to have a real debate. It's time for Canada to defend its citizens and place on the world stage. For the C2C Journal, my name is Aaron Gunn. Thanks for watching.